My name is Kylie Mitchell, and I'm 30 now. But that Thanksgiving when I was 28 changed everything for me. I walked into my parents' house in the suburbs of Baltimore, expecting a regular holiday dinner. Everyone was already at the table. My older brother Nolan and his wife Brianna were talking about needing around $20,000 to expand their kitchen for the kids. When I quietly brought up that I could use some help with the $4,500 deposit on a new apartment downtown, the conversation stopped cold. Nolan looked directly at me and said, "Mom and Dad always said my family should come first, while yours should always be last." Mom and Dad didn't argue. They just nodded. Mom added softly, "Nolan has more responsibilities now." Dad agreed. Families with kids need more support. I felt the words like a punch, but I stayed calm. I looked at them and simply said, "All right, I understand." That was the first time they admitted it out loud. And when the day came years later that they needed my help more than ever and came begging, I looked Nolan in the eye and repeated his exact words right back to him. If you've ever been told you're always last in your own family, stick, snorts, around. This one's for you. Like the video if this hits home. Subscribe for more real stories about toxic family dynamics, setting boundaries, and finally putting yourself first. Drop your experience in the comments. I read everyone. Snorts. Share this with someone who needs to hear they're not alone. Thanks for watching. As I sat there pushing food around my plate, the memories flooded back. Each one proving that statement wasn't new. It started with birthdays. When my older brother Nolan Mitchell, who is 35, now turned 16, Mom and Dad surprised him with a used sedan that was still in great condition, worth about $18,000. They handed him the keys in the driveway. Everyone laughing and hugging while I watched from the window. 6 months later, on my own 16th birthday, all I got was a cake and a simple card. No car, no big celebration, just the quiet understanding that his milestones mattered more even back then. College made the difference even clearer. Nolan attended a private university right here in Maryland, and our parents covered most of the tuition without hesitation, driving up for move-in day, loaded with new furniture and supplies. I worked 3 jobs that summer and throughout school shifts at a local cafe, delivery runs in the evenings, and babysitting on weekends to pay my way through community college first. When I finally transferred to a public university on a small scholarship, I earned myself. Mom and Dad never even mentioned helping out. They said money was tight after Nolan's expenses, and he was the one with the brighter academic future anyway. I accepted it, kept working late nights, and graduated without them in the audience because they were busy with something for Nolan's growing family. Then came the wedding. Nolan and his wife, Brianna Mitchell, had a beautiful ceremony and reception at a nice hall in Baltimore, costing around $32,000 in total. Everything from the flowers to the band screamed celebration, and our parents beamed with pride the entire day. As a bridesmaid, I paid for my own dress and gas to drive back and forth for fittings and rehearsals. I smiled in the photos, toasted the happy couple, and never complained, even though it meant dipping into savings I had scraped together from those endless shifts. After they married, the support kept flowing in Nolan's direction. When he decided to open a small coffee shop, Mom and Dad contributed a substantial amount towards startup costs, helping him secure the lease and equipment. They would regularly drive the 45 minutes across town to watch the place when he needed a break or to babysit the kids so he and Brianna could handle inventory or just take a night off. Their retirement time and energy seemed endlessly available for whatever Nolan needed to get his business going. The real sting came a few years ago with that Facebook post. Nolan shared photos from a family trip to Europe that Mom and Dad had helped fund, captioning it, "Something about how older siblings with real families come first when it comes to parental support." The likes and congratulatory comments poured in from relatives, many of whom I hadn't heard from in ages. I scrolled through it late one night, feeling the words cut deeper than any direct conversation ever had. That post made the favoritism public, turning private pain into something everyone could see and quietly approve. From then on, I pulled back from extended family gatherings, responding less to group messages and invitations because it hurt too much to pretend everything was equal. Even smaller things drove the point home over the years. On weekends, when Nolan and Brianna wanted date nights, Mom and Dad happily made the drive to watch their grandkids, staying as late as needed without complaint. But when I once asked if they could swing by my apartment to water plants or pick up mail while I was away for a short work trip, Mom sighed and said they weren't as young as they used to be and couldn't be running around for everyone. Dad backed her up, reminding me that Nolan had actual family obligations that took priority. Looking back, the pattern was unmistakable. Every resource, money, time, attention flowed toward Nolan and his life, while mine was treated as an afterthought I should handle alone. The unfairness built quietly over the years, shaping how I saw my place in the family, making me independent out of necessity rather than choice. It wasn't anger that hit me hardest at that table. It was the sad realization that nothing had ever been equal. And now they were finally admitting it without shame. That night, driving back to my apartment through the quiet Baltimore streets, I decided things had to change. The realization settled over me like a weightlifting, pushing me to channel every ounce of energy into my professional life in a way I had never fully committed to before. I worked in marketing for a tech company located in the heart of downtown Baltimore, beginning in a junior role that involved tracking campaign performance, crafting content calendars, and assisting with client presentations that often ran late into the evening. The position challenged me daily, requiring quick adaptation to new tools and strategies, but it also provided a clear path forward where my contributions were measured and appreciated based on merit alone. As months turned into years, I pursued growth relentlessly, taking on additional responsibilities that stretched my skills and demonstrated my reliability to the team. I spearheaded initiatives like redesigning email sequences that boosted open rates significantly and coordinating cross-department collaborations for product launches that received positive feedback from upper management. These successes led to steady promotions, elevating me to a manager role, where I guided junior staff, managed budgets for multi-million-dollar accounts, and reported directly on quarterly goals. With each advancement came a salary increase, rising from $52,000 annually to $98,000, a figure that acknowledged the expertise I had developed through dedication and late nights studying industry trends. Snorts, even with the growing paycheck, I resisted the temptation to upgrade my lifestyle in ways that might draw questions or expectations from others. I stayed in the same comfortable but unassuming apartment I had chosen years earlier, valuing its convenience to work and the familiarity it offered during times of transition. My car remained the practical sedan I had bought secondhand with money saved from earlier jobs, reliable enough for daily commutes without the need for something flashier. Keeping expenses low was not just practical. It felt like a deliberate choice, a way to honor the self-reliance I had cultivated out of necessity. That mindset extended naturally to how I handled my finances overall. I researched options carefully and opened investment accounts, committing to regular contributions into diversified exchange-traded funds that offered steady growth with managed risk, along with taking full advantage of the company's stock purchase plan. Reviewing statements became a monthly ritual, one that brought a sense of accomplishment as balances climbed through consistent deposits and market gains. Over time, those disciplined habits built a portfolio worth approximately $180,000, a safety net that provided peace of mind and options for the future I was shaping independently. Around the office, the transformation in my approach did not go unnoticed. My coworker Damon Rios commented on it during a casual lunch break one day, noting how I carried myself with more assurance in meetings, offering insights confidently and leading discussions with a calm authority that inspired the team. He mentioned that I seemed more centered, as if I had resolved some internal conflict and was now operating at full capacity without distractions holding me back. His kindness in pointing it out resonated deeply, serving as external validation for the internal progress I was making. On a personal level, the shift meant pulling away from old patterns of seeking validation where it had never been freely given. I ceased mentioning promotions or financial milestones to Mom and Dad or Nolan, recognizing that such news rarely received the enthusiasm it deserved and often shifted focus elsewhere. The Thanksgiving gathering had crystallized that truth, turning lingering resentment into motivation to invest wholly in myself. Embracing this independence brought a profound sense of empowerment mixed with occasional solitude moments when I acknowledged how much I had learned to depend on my own strength. Yet the rewards outweighed the isolation, reinforcing that true security came from within, built step by step through choices that prioritized my well-being above everything else. Over the next couple of years, I quietly rebuilt my life around people who actually saw me. One afternoon, while grabbing coffee near the office during a busy workday, I met my boyfriend Ryder Sodto, a kind and thoughtful guy who worked in a nearby building and happened to strike up a conversation about the book I was reading. We started chatting regularly after that meeting for quick lunches or evening walks along the harbor, and our connection grew naturally without any pressure or expectations. With Ryder, I felt truly heard for the first time in a long while as he asked about my day with genuine interest and remembered details from previous talks, making me realize how rare it was to have someone value my thoughts and experiences simply because they mattered to him. Around the same time, I decided to seek professional help to make sense of everything that had built up inside. I began seeing my therapist, Dr. Paula Ortiz, a compassionate professional who specialized in family relationships and helped me unpack the patterns I had lived with for so long. Through our sessions, she explained the concepts of golden child and scapegoat dynamics in a way that made everything click, showing how certain roles get assigned early and shape interactions without anyone fully realizing the damage. Talking openly in that safe space allowed me to process the hurt and resentment, turning confusion into understanding and gradually easing the weight I had carried alone. Having that support extended beyond therapy when I reconnected more deeply with my cousin Leah Griffin, someone who had always been a quiet ally on the fringes of family events. Leah reached out after noticing my absence from gatherings, and we started meeting for coffee or phone calls where she listened without judgment, sharing her own observations about the uneven treatment over the years. She became a confidant I could trust, offering encouragement that reinforced my choices and reminding me that not everyone in the extended family was blind to what had happened. As part of protecting my peace, I started setting clearer boundaries with the rest of the family. I politely declined invitations to holidays and birthdays, citing work commitments or prior plans, and instead used my vacation time for trips that refreshed me completely. Flying out from BWI Airport to places like Florida or Arizona during the colder months gave me a break from Maryland's gray winters, allowing time to recharge in warmer weather and explore new spots on my own terms. Those solo getaways, or occasional ones with Ryder, brought a sense of freedom I had never known, free from obligations that always left me feeling secondary. In conversations with Leah, she opened up about subtle comments she had overheard from other relatives, mentioning how some acknowledged the favoritism privately, but stayed silent to avoid conflict. Hearing that validated my experiences, further easing any lingering doubt about whether I had imagined the imbalance. It also highlighted how complicated family loyalty could be, with people choosing comfort over confrontation. But it strengthened my resolve to prioritize relationships that felt reciprocal and kind. Letting go of the need to prove my worth to those who never saw it brought an unexpected lightness, a relief that settled in slowly as months passed. The emotional energy once spent hoping for change now fueled connections that nurtured me, creating space for joy and authenticity. With Ryder's steady presence and Leah's unwavering support alongside the insights from Dr. Ortiz, I began to heal in ways I hadn't thought possible. Discovering that true belonging comes from being valued exactly as you are, not from forcing a place where you never quite fit. Over the next couple of years, I quietly rebuilt my life around people who actually saw me. One afternoon, while grabbing coffee near the office during a busy workday, I met my boyfriend Ryder Sodto, a kind and thoughtful guy who worked in a nearby building and happened to strike up a conversation about the book I was reading. We started chatting regularly after that meeting for quick lunches or evening walks along the harbor, and our connection grew naturally without any pressure or expectations. With Ryder, I felt truly heard for the first time in a long while as he asked about my day with genuine interest and remembered details from previous talks, making me realize how rare it was to have someone value my thoughts and experiences simply because they mattered to him. Around the same time, I decided to seek professional help to make sense of everything that had built up inside. I began seeing my therapist, Dr. Paula Ortiz, a compassionate professional who specialized in family relationships and helped me unpack the patterns I had lived with for so long. Through our sessions, she explained the concepts of golden child and scapegoat dynamics in a way that made everything click, showing how certain roles get assigned early and shape interactions without anyone fully realizing the damage. Talking openly in that safe space allowed me to process the hurt and resentment, turning confusion into understanding and gradually easing the weight I had carried alone. Having that support extended beyond therapy when I reconnected more deeply with my cousin Leah Griffin, someone who had always been a quiet ally on the fringes of family events. Leah reached out after noticing my absence from gatherings, and we started meeting for coffee or phone calls where she listened without judgment, sharing her own observations about the uneven treatment over the years. She became a confidant I could trust, offering encouragement that reinforced my choices and reminding me that not everyone in the extended family was blind to what had happened. As part of protecting my peace, I started setting clearer boundaries with the rest of the family. I politely declined invitations to holidays and birthdays, citing work commitments or prior plans, and instead used my vacation time for trips that refreshed me completely. Flying out from BWI Airport to places like Florida or Arizona during the colder months gave me a break from Maryland's gray winters, allowing time to recharge in warmer weather and explore new spots on my own terms. Those solo getaways or occasional ones with Ryder brought a sense of freedom I had never known, free from obligations that always left me feeling secondary. In conversations with Leah, she opened up about subtle comments she had overheard from other relatives, mentioning how some acknowledged the favoritism privately, but stayed silent to avoid conflict. Hearing that validated my experiences, further easing any lingering doubt about whether I had imagined the imbalance. It also highlighted how complicated family loyalty could be, with people choosing comfort over confrontation. But it strengthened my resolve to prioritize relationships that felt reciprocal and kind. Letting go of the need to prove my worth to those who never saw it brought an unexpected lightness, a relief that settled in slowly as months passed. The emotional energy once spent hoping for change now fueled connections that nurtured me, creating space for joy and authenticity. With Ryder's steady presence and Leah's unwavering support alongside the insights from Dr. Ortiz, I began to heal in ways I hadn't thought possible, discovering that true belonging comes from being valued exactly as you are, not from forcing a place where you never quite fit. About 18 months after that Thanksgiving, my phone lit up with Nolan's name. One rainy Baltimore evening. I stared at the screen for a moment before answering, wondering what could prompt a call from him after so much silence on both sides. His voice came through shaky and broken, nothing like the confident tone I remembered from family gatherings long ago. He explained that his company had gone through major layoffs, and he was one of the many let go as part of cost-cutting measures that hit middle management hardest. The news caught me off guard, but what followed painted a picture of troubles that had been building for much longer. Nolan went on to describe how he and Brianna had stretched their finances over the years to maintain a certain lifestyle in their large suburban home, complete with high mortgage payments they could once afford comfortably. They drove expensive SUVs that symbolized success in their circle, enrolled the kids in private school for the perceived advantages, and took regular vacations to keep up appearances with friends and neighbors. Those choices seemed manageable when income was steady. But the job loss exposed how precarious it all had become, turning small indulgences into overwhelming burdens. The debt had piled up quietly at first, with credit cards carrying balances around $42,000 from everyday expenses and unexpected repairs that they kept charging instead of cutting back. Mortgage payments fell behind by 3 or 4 months as they prioritized other bills, hoping Nolan would land something new quickly. Then came the final notice from the private school about overdue tuition, a letter warning that the children would not be allowed to continue unless the account was brought current immediately. Brianna had experienced the most humiliating moment just days earlier when she loaded groceries into the SUV after a shopping trip only to return and find the vehicle gone repossessed by the lender right there in the parking lot. She stood in the rain, calling Nolan, forced to arrange a ride home, while explaining to the kids why their car had vanished. The incident shattered any remaining illusion of control, leaving them both panicked about what came next. Through sobs, Nolan admitted they had hidden the severity from Mom and Dad, at first trying to handle it privately, as pride kept them from asking for help sooner. But now options were running out with collection calls coming daily and no quick resolution in sight for employment. He snorts, spoke of the fear gripping their home, the arguments over money that strained their marriage, and the confusion the children felt from the sudden changes in routine. It was clear the perfect life they had projected for so long was unraveling, rapidly built on foundations that could not withstand real pressure. I listened without interrupting, much feeling a complex mix of emotions rise as he poured out the details. There was sympathy for the stress they faced, especially with young kids involved, but also a quiet recognition of how different our paths had been. While they spent freely assuming stability, I had learned caution the hard way. And hearing the desperation in Nolan's voice stirred something deeper, an understanding that roles once fixed were shifting in ways no one anticipated. When he finally paused, asking if I could offer any advice or assistance given my stable situation, I kept my response measured. I told him it was a lot to take in and that I needed time to process everything before committing to anything. He sounded relieved just to have been heard, thanking me repeatedly and promising more details if needed. Hanging up, I sat in silence for a while, the rain tapping against the window as I weighed what this call really meant after all the years of distance. A few days later, I drove to Mom and Dad's house for what they called an emergency family meeting. The living room felt tense the moment I walked in, with Nolan and Brianna sitting close on the couch and Mom and Dad in their usual chairs, papers spread across the coffee table like evidence in a trial. They wasted no time laying out the situation, explaining that the immediate crisis required around $50,000 to cover overdue bills, bring the mortgage current, and settle the private school tuition before the deadline hit. Mom started by emphasizing how critical it was to act fast, suggesting that I could liquidate some investments or take out a personal loan to make it happen without delay. Dad added that it would make sense for me to move back home temporarily, saving on rent and freeing up more money to contribute while Nolan got back on his feet. Their plan assumed my resources were available for the family to use, presented as the obvious solution to a problem they saw as shared. The emotional pressure built quickly as they spoke. Mom leaned forward and said, "Family takes care of family no matter what," implying that hesitation on my part would mean abandoning them in their darkest hour. Dad reinforced it by warning that turning away now would damage relationships beyond repair, making it clear they viewed refusal as a personal betrayal. They brought up the kids, mentioning how Nolan's children kept asking about Aunt Kylie and why she didn't visit anymore, using innocence as leverage to pull at any remaining guilt. Nolan and Brianna played their part with practiced remorse, expressing regret for past mistakes and promising this was just a temporary setback they would recover from soon. Nolan stressed how much easier it would be for me since I was single with no dependents, framing my independence as an advantage that made sacrifice simpler compared to their responsibilities. Brianna nodded along, adding soft comments about how grateful they would be and how it would bring everyone closer again. Throughout the conversation, the expectation hung heavy that I would step up without question, as if my years of self-reliance existed only to bail them out when needed. The manipulation felt familiar yet sharper now, stirring a mix of anger and sorrow that they still saw me as the one who should give without receiving. It hurt to hear the same patterns repeated, the subtle reminders that my life was less important because it lacked the elements they valued most. I sat quietly absorbing it all, feeling the weight of old dynamics pressing down while something stronger pushed back inside. The room waited for my agreement faces, hopeful that compliance was inevitable. Instead, I told them this was a significant request, and I needed time to review my options carefully before deciding anything. They exchanged glances, interpreting my words as acceptance in progress with Mom, even smiling slightly in relief. Driving away afterward, the encounter left me unsettled, yet strangely resolved the blatant assumptions, confirming how little had truly changed in their eyes. The demand for sacrifice without reciprocity echoed everything from the past. But now it carried a different weight, one that highlighted the distance I had created for good reason. The next evening, I returned with Ryder by my side and a folder of documents in my hand. The atmosphere in the living room shifted the moment we sat down with Noel and Brianna, Mom and Dad looking expectant, ready to discuss how I would handle the financial transfer. I placed the folder on the table and began pulling out the papers one by one, starting with recent pay stubs showing my current salary and consistent increases over time. Next came statements from my investment accounts, clearly displaying balances that had grown to approximately $180,000 through careful contributions and growth. I finished with details on the company stock rewards I had earned, options that promised even more stability in the coming years. Their reactions unfolded slowly at first eyes, widening as they passed the documents around and absorbed the numbers. Mom set a page down with trembling hands, whispering that they had no idea I was doing so well. Snorts. Dad stared at the totals in disbelief, admitting they always assumed I was just getting by like I used to. Nolan leaned back, exchanging glances with Brianna, who looked stunned that the sister they viewed as struggling had built something so solid without their knowledge or involvement. The shock gave me the opening I needed. I looked directly at Nolan and said calmly, "I'm only following what you said. My family comes last." The words hung in the air, echoing the exact phrase he had used at that Thanksgiving table. And I watched the recognition hit him. I explained quietly that years of favoritism had taught me a painful but valuable lesson about prioritizing my own well-being when no one else would. The constant overlooking of my efforts and needs had pushed me to create boundaries and focus on self-reliance, turning what felt like rejection into strength. Refusing to help now wasn't about punishment. It was about consistency with the rules they had set long ago. Ryder reached for my hand under the table, squeezing it gently in silent support. His presence a reminder of the healthy relationships I had chosen instead. Later that night, Leah called as soon as I told her what happened, cheering my decision and saying she was proud. I finally stood up for the respect I deserved all along. Their backing made the moment feel less isolating, reinforcing that real family shows up with encouragement rather than demands. Over the following year, the consequences played out exactly as expected without my intervention. Nolan and Brianna filed for Chapter 7 bankruptcy, a process that wiped out unsecured debts but forced them to surrender non-essential assets. The bank proceeded with foreclosure on their suburban home after missed payments piled up, leading them to rent a much smaller apartment in a less expensive part of Baltimore. The children adjusted to public school, losing the private institution they had attended, and daily life became simpler out of necessity. Mom and Dad reached out several times at first, leaving voicemails filled with disappointment and pleas to reconsider, but I blocked the numbers after realizing reconciliation would only repeat old patterns. The silence that followed brought a profound peace, freeing me from the emotional pull that had lingered for decades. Snorts. In that same year, Ryder and I married in a small, warm ceremony, surrounded by friends who truly celebrated us. The day felt intimate and joyful, focused on promises we made to each other rather than appearances or expectations. Starting our life together without the shadow of past dynamics allowed genuine happiness to take root, a contrast that highlighted how far I had come. Looking back, the favoritism that once broke my heart ultimately led to the greatest gift: learning to value myself enough to walk away. Actions have consequences, and enabling imbalance only delays the inevitable fallout. For anyone listening who has felt overlooked in their own family, know that choosing yourself isn't selfish. It's survival. And it opens the door to relationships that honor your worth. True change begins when you stop accepting less than you deserve. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for staying with me until the end of the story. Your time means a lot, and I'm truly grateful to everyone who listened all the way through. If anything here resonated with you, please share your thoughts or experiences in the comments below. I read every single one and look forward to hearing from you.